Hey everybody, how's it going? Mike Casey, I'm with Anduro, work for Mara, Director of Engineering for Maritech. I'm here to talk to you today about Hourglass. How many people have heard of Hourglass? We'll show of hands. Okay, so everybody's heard of it. How many people think they understand really what Hourglass is? Okay.
Version what? Version 1 or 2?
Version 1. Version 1. Let's start off with just version 1. Version 2, I don't even understand what that is yet. But, So, version 1 of Hourglass, it's a very simple concept. Instead of confiscating or just have a total liquidation event, this is a middle ground where you restrict. So you have a restriction of the coin flow. Now, this is great because we did the math, and if you had miners ready, willing, and you had a sufficiently advanced quantum computer, you had miners ready and willing to take your transactions, you could liquidate all of the P2PK transactions in about 3 hours. This just went dead. Extra?
The computer went dead?
No, it locked.
It timed out. I'll plug it in.
It's fine.
Just unlock it, please.
No worries. The slides aren't that important. All right. So what it does is it puts a restriction. Hourglass V1 puts a restriction on the P2PK coins, which, as I hope you all know by now, they show the public key and it's posted to the blockchain for all to see, right? So if somebody's got a sufficiently advanced one, the problem with it is, game theoretically, if you have such a sufficiently advanced computer and you have it all to yourself, and you know you have it all to yourself, your advantage is to not let anybody know you're doing it, and if you are going to attack this set of coins, then you're going to want to break as many as possible so that you can reap your reward all at once, right? So that's the game theory behind the state of things right now as it exists in a liquidation environment. If you think you're the only one with a quantum computer, you're not going to tell anybody about it. You're just going to start breaking keys and then storing them on a hard drive, right? And then once you have, well, a couple million, let's say a million coins worth or whatever, then you reveal it, mine them all, and it's done. You have a massive Q-day liquidation event. So the goal with this is to, really not a lot of time, the goal with this is to make that last over a longer period of time. Instead of 3 hours, Hourglass only allows you to spend one of these P2PK outputs per block, right? So only one input in any transaction with these. Now there are several of them that have a couple thousand Bitcoin in them, but by and large, the vast majority of these have 50 BTC per. So what that means is 50 BTC per block could potentially come onto the market, and that means that 3 hours would take nearly 8 months to go through. So this actually changes things from a game theoretical perspective. So now, if you're thinking, okay, if I have a quantum miner and I think I'm the only one, but somebody else may come up with one soon, then I want to start right away mining these things. It also legitimizes this pool of coins to say, hey, we expect these to be quantum attacked. So these coins are not, they're presumed dead. You're not actually stealing from somebody. It's highly unlikely somebody's going to come after you and say, you stole my coins, bro, because these have been sitting dormant the entire history of Bitcoin. So they're a good, easy target if you want to direct them to. What the advantage gives it to, what I find the biggest problem that people have is, people don't even believe this is a threat. You don't know it's coming. And if the actors, the assumption is that there will be a steady march of progression, and we will know, oh, it's coming, and we'll have time to prepare. But if the guy from PsyQuantum is right, and it's a bathtub, right, and suddenly you go from having zero capability to do this attack to being able to do this attack very easily and readily at scale, right? The question is, what are you going to go for at that point? And the reason Satoshi's coins are so vulnerable is because they don't have anybody who's going to come after you. So think about Razakhan, right? So how much Bitcoin did those two have? And they stole it from Bitfinex. They had the receipts. Guess what? Bitcoin, as much as we like to think otherwise, is not very fungible. You can track and trace on chain. So are people who have the ability to break these keys, are they going to go after people who could potentially prove that they had these keys, because you can track them and trace them across the network. When you try to liquidate those keys, they're going to say, where did you get that? Oh, yeah, no, it was an inside job. No, that was an exchange. You didn't realize it was an exchange. You just stole from an exchange. So if you want to obviate all that, just go for some dead coins, right? Because it's really easy to hide in that. So with Hourglass, you can do that, but it also leaves the ability for people who do rediscover them to be able to use their coins. So you can actually, I actually ran into a guy at one of the recent conferences who was actually one of these stories. He was a guy who found his old wallet.dat file from 2011 and was able to reclaim a life-changing amount of money. Now, there are not many people like that, I don't assume, but if Hourglass is in place and we don't do a total confiscation, that person can get their money back. There are some interesting knock-on effects. So if you have more than one quantum computer that comes online and has the ability to crack these things at a rate higher than 1 per block, they now have to bid against one another in order to get into that block. And the cheaper it gets to do this, the more of the fee from the 50 BTCs that they're getting has to go to the miners. So this actually becomes a rather efficient boon for the miners instead of the attackers, because quickly they start competing with, well, if it only takes me 4 Bitcoin to do it, I can live with 5 Bitcoin, and the other 45 Bitcoin, I'm just going to pay a miner fee. So it's a race to the bottom if you get more than 2. Hey, Rich.
So once this Hourglass proposal activates, and anyone that rediscovers their wallet and wants to protect their Bitcoin, they also have to compete for each other. So
if there's a quantum attacker, correct?
No. If there's just a bunch of people that have pay-to-public key outputs.
Well, correct, but it's only 1 per block. So, yeah, I mean, so if you see a whole lot of them start moving at once, you can still submit 1 transaction per block. It just slows it down. Versus a complete confiscation means, no, they can't at all, ever.
But as soon as anyone starts moving pay-to-public key outputs, they're going to compete for being that 1 transaction per block, because they're like, oh, this is a quantum attack, and isn't that the same effect as essentially redistributing the coins to mining rewards? So should we just,
I mean, other than a quantum attack, there isn't that much demand for P2PK. They rarely move, right? So unless you have a quantum event, if you have 2 actors that are just waiting to move their coins, they're not going to compete against each other. They're just going to wait. But if it doesn't eventually peter out and if they keep coming, well, then we can safely assume it's a quantum event. And then that's probably what's going on. But yes, so the alternative to that is a total confiscation, in which that person would have no access to their coins. Or a total liquidation, in which case, they would just get stolen. Yes?
Hi, I would like to propose Hourglass V3 to solve this problem. But let's just turn it on right now with no throttle and define some interval after which each time you hit the interval, you have down to half the block can be pay-to-public keys, and just keep rationing it down as each interval passes.
So there is a problem if you don't do the symbol. So the thing about Hourglass V1, I haven't even got to V2 yet, I'm running short of time. But the thing about V1 is it's very simplistic to execute, and the problem with trying to mess with the time interval is you run into people relitigating blocks. So let's say we did 1 per day, right? So, or every other block. At that point in time, even every other block, if you allow 1 and you try to halve the period and prolong it out, then people will never mine the next block. They'll just try to relitigate the last block with a potential 50 BTC on the line in a world where there's multiple. So you run into these problems pretty quickly. If I only got a couple minutes left, let me try to get to V2, which admittedly V2 is half-baked. But it's not an actual proposal yet. But, so the idea, if we can pull it off, would be to do a consensus level, a complete, not just P2BK outputs, but every single output of a given type with a revealed key. Now, in order to pull this off, you would have to re-index everything. You would have to go back to the history of time, do this as a soft fork, and then you could, let's just say you could pull some crazy scheme, which I haven't thought all the way through, but let's say you could actually commit to multiple Bloom filters. You take the transaction ID, you take the first couple of bytes of the transaction ID and you create, 200 Bloom filters. And you take those and you actually mark every single, you add to the Bloom filter every single one of these transactions that has a public key revealed. You actually throw the public key in there, right? So now you have a record of the public key. Every time you see a new public key, you have a record of an address, the address, not the public key. So every time a public key to an address is revealed, you take the address, you throw it in its appropriate Bloom filter, and then you have a record of that. Now you take all the outputs of every transaction that has a revealed public key, and of those, the maximum you can spend is 1 Bitcoin per block out of those, and people bid for space in that. So this actually leads to a very interesting problem, because then, okay, let's say you do that and pull it off. For one, it is very restrictive, but it would prevent, in the event of a total quantum attack failure, it would be, probably 100 years out before you could actually spend and liquidate all those coins. But there's a way around this in that you could just partner with a miner and say, okay, well, you can only move an output of one of these, but I can pay the fee. So you have to restrict the fee as well. So if you restrict the fee, if you restrict the actual output to 1 Bitcoin and the fee paid on the transactions to 1 Bitcoin as well, or whatever you spend in the transaction, then you can't pay the miner and collude with them out of band any more than you're receiving yourself, right? So that would eliminate that problem. But the goal with it, why all this insane, crazy stuff? It would allow, if we could pull off allowing, the two big ones, as we went over this morning, the two ones we're really concerned about are the P2PK stash and reused addresses. If we look at Taproot, yeah, it could secure value in L2s, but if we're talking about actual Bitcoin, the only thing really at risk is a very, very small pile of Bitcoins, right? And bare multi-sig as well. There's nothing in there. It's not worried about. But reused addresses are a major problem. And the only thing you can do if you're trying, short of fully incentivizing everybody and get everybody on the same page to move addresses to prepare for a quantum attack, would be to limit them. Otherwise, we do run the risk of a catastrophic fee at market price event. But may not be the end of the world. Bitcoin may survive. Bitcoin will definitely survive, but it may not be the Bitcoin we all know and love today. So that's the general idea behind Hourglass V2. I have 2 minutes left, open to questions. I'm sure you all have none.
Go to the next slide, by the way.
Oh, didn't get to it. All right. Oh, see, yeah, it's this is 100 slides. I thought it would take over today. So yeah, take 120 years at 1 BTC throughput, which would actually, assuming a world where quantum is completely compromised, you would have an actual subsidy of the miners because you have this throughput of 1 BTC. Actually, you'd have to have that, Hunter, if you had 1 per fee. If you had 1 BTC total plus 1 BTC throughput, that would take 60 years. But it's still a good long while.
V2 in particular seems quite sheddable. Like, why 1 BTC? Why not half a BTC? Why not?
Well, everything about V1 is bike sheddable because that's the thing is it's a very complex proposal. So that's one of the weaknesses versus V1 is there's no simple way to pull it off. So 1 BTC is quite arbitrary, but if you look at it, that works out to, with the fee, 60 years worth of potentially extra fees for the miners of a subsidy, which would be a lot better. So it is arbitrary, completely. So not going to pretend it's not.
It's 1 Bitcoin fee plus the output.
It's so it's a combined output of 1 Bitcoin of all of the transactions of revealed
the
keys.
proposal says output and fee together are 1 Bitcoin or less. So
right, that was the original proposal. We've been told on. Well, exactly. I told you this is a very half-baked proposal, and that's kind of what we're bringing it to you for this breakout session to get feedback and improve.
I have a question. So, 2 scenarios, right? What's the throttle switch? either there is quantum computers or competing parties with quantum computers that that break this, or there's not, right? And people that want to get out are honest. But that's in that scenario, it's just very unlikely that they want to do that, but they didn't migrate earlier, right? Already. So really, this is in effect just television mining reports.
Right.
Just phrase it as that just confiscates and install like a one Bitcoin per block mining report.
Well, so remember, hold on, it only affects the output though, right? So the rule with it is you actually have to send anything that you're not paying a fee up to the total fee, which is no greater than what you're actually sending. So you can't collude with the miner by sending a fee, taking it out of band. So, but for any amounts less than that, anything you spend overage from the amount goes back to the initial address that you spent from as change. So you don't actually lose any of that, but there is a separate fee market for these, right? So you have your own separate mempool.
But quantum computers, like these are not original owners of these coins anymore, right?
Well, no, I mean, but again, it's not just the original owners. This applies to everybody who didn't move beforehand, right? Yeah.
Any other questions?
What's the current rate of P2PK transactions like per year?
It's very, very, very low.
That's
They're
right.
assumed dead.
Yeah.
Right. So remember, Hourglass V1 only applies to P2PK. Hourglass V2 applies to anything that has a reveal public key, including reused addresses.
600 year to good. Okay. This is trivially looked up but yeah.
They're not terribly common. Yeah. So an implementation of Hourglass 1 isn't going to be prohibitively restricted sans a quantum event.
I also just want to make sure you didn't mention right the reused addresses.
Can't hear you from back there.
The error. No, I just want to make sure so V1 applies only to P2PK, V2 applies to reused addresses, but the actual technical architecture for that hasn't been ironed out.
Correct.
We're trying to figure out how to do that. So, we're open to feedback.
It's not a simple, straightforward problem.
Not simple.
Alright.